Hi, my name is David Hoppe, and this is the Esports panel at GamesBeat, Esports Beyond the Hype. We have a great panel, and we want to thank Dean and his team for putting together a great program and a quick pivot to digital. We're very honored and excited to be part of this. I'm going to start just with brief introductions of our panelists, which are experts, and we're going to have, I think, some great insights today. First of all, my name is David Hoppe. I'm a lawyer with Gamma Law, which is a video games and esports focused law practice in San Francisco. Karim, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, David, and thanks everybody for having me here. My name is Karim Farghaly. I lead the business development team at Bandai Namco Entertainment America. So among some of the things that we look after is the monetization of esports. And as most of you probably know, we have currently 3 world tours that we operate globally, the Tekken 7 World Tour, the Soul Calibur 6 World Tour, and the Dragon Ball Fighters World Tour.
Great, thank you. Neo?
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Neo Liu. I'm from Tencent. I'm the head of publishing of North American business. And for publishing, a lot of new game is coming, and we are mostly focused on the PUBG Mobile, the biggest mobile game around the world. So for this panel, I think for esports, it's a very interesting topic, especially from the developer side. And Tencent holding a lot of big esports tournaments around the world. And especially for the game we are publishing right now, PUBG Mobile. It's growing. After 2 years, we have a huge amount of user base, and we do see a lot of users focusing on the esports content a lot. So it will be interesting to discuss with other panelists about what's going on in China and the mobile esports and the industry. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Jacob?
Sure. My name is Jacob Navok. I'm CEO of GenVid Technologies. We create technology solutions for game publishers to develop interactivity on their broadcasts. I started this company 4 years ago. Before that, I was a longtime executive at Square Enix Holdings, working in the president's office, leading worldwide business development and strategy.
Great, thank you. Well, we've all seen the headlines in the mainstream press. League of Legends World Championships gets more viewers than the Super Bowl. Huge dollar amounts paid out in major tournaments, more than any traditional sport. The influx of sponsorship amounts, which has grown and diversified in a few short years from so-called endemics like hardware and gaming chair manufacturers, then transitioning to snacks and energy drinks, and now up to brands like BMW and Louis Vuitton. But does all this signify the emergence of a new industry with real business opportunities beyond just tournament operation and support for the big incumbent players in the space? And given all the challenges like fragmentation among different games, leagues, and regions, lack of infrastructure like for player development, and reliance on live events with the uncertainty there that we see now for the foreseeable future, how do we see esports developing in the short to medium term? So we're going to start just by addressing the impact of COVID-19 on the ecosystem here, and what might be some of the additional challenges that will result from that, and possibly some opportunities. Karim, we'll start with you. So, as Bandai Namco is mostly known for fighting games, and that community, to say the least, enjoys their live events, how are you planning for the current situation going forward?
Well, that's an excellent question, and it's very unfortunate, at least for our community. As you know, the fighting game community is very based on live events. I mean, there's definitely a community feel, and then obviously the latency and fairness that the ability to play on the same station or on a very closed network does incite people to come to live events versus playing online. So as such, our tours are currently postponed. obviously, and it's a huge blow for the community. And obviously, Bandai Namco Entertainment and some of the other fighting game publishers have been reaching out to the community and trying to help as much as possible. But the reality is, and we're in a wait and see situation. We have what we've done is very proactively. We've reached out to our sponsors, we've reached out to our business partners, and we've reached out to the community leaders in general, and really included them in this process of what is going to be the Tekken or Soul Calibur World Tour or Dragon Ball World Tour. What will they look like for the remainder of 2020 and beyond? Obviously, we are postponed now until most likely the beginning of August, which is usually when our EVO championship happens in Las Vegas, which is usually the mid-season for the fighting game community. There have been no plans to cancel that event, but obviously, as we realize the situation in terms of having to come back and maybe social distancing, having to stay with us for a little while longer, we have been planning to see if there's any other types of tournaments that we can put together, and of course, looking at online solutions as well. I mean, this is something that may become a more de facto standard in the fighting game community. I don't believe that necessarily the live events will go away, but we are planning on maybe not having any live events in 2020 and resuming the tours in 21 if we have to.
Great, thank you. So that's a pretty good segue to Jacob, with your focus on online tournaments and technologies. Maybe you can tell me a bit about what your company does and what sorts of opportunities and you see arising now with the current situation.
We provide tools and technologies for broadcasters, tournament organizers, most importantly, game developers to be able to generate their own interactivity. The number of online tournaments has never been greater than now. It is as busy as it has ever been, and we are as busy as we have ever been. A lot of the game developers are looking at the opportunities in the space and realizing that maybe it's something greater than just providing tools for streamers. Maybe we should be creating content with online interactivity in mind. A couple of weeks ago, we debuted 5 new games that have been built from the ground up with interactivity, and that's only accelerating. So more and more people are thinking about, can we create broadcasts that bring people who are interacting with it back into the content? And so I suspect that trajectory is actually not going to decline even as we do end social distancing and return end of this year, early next year. It's going to accelerate.
I see. Neo, with your long experience and deep knowledge of the Chinese esports market, maybe you can let us know kind of what takeaways you might see from the way the pandemic has been handled in China. And maybe it's too early to ask this, but since China seems to be a couple months ahead of North America and Europe in terms of the pandemic, do you see anything emerging, anything sort of any recovery signs in China that might be helpful for us to understand here?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. I think it's a good opportunity to share what's happening in China. Like, it's still like kind of lockdown for the offline events. Big offline event is not allowed. No concert, no sports event. So that's why we move most of the events on to online, including our PUBG Mobile global tournament. It basically happens online. I think Karim and Jacob basically talk about the online online option to host such kind of tournament. The challenge is basically the latency, the fairness, and how to make sure the people are very engaged. The good news is that I think everyone see a good trend of the content viewership because everyone looking for some content when they have to stay at home or they don't have any other choices right now. Basically, no football, no soccer, no basketball events. But meanwhile, I think this is an opportunity for the game industry, the whole esports industry to develop in a good direction because people are aware how engaging the content can be. On the other side is that how people can perceive that why we need a live event. Many people, even my friends, ask me, hey, these guys are just playing online. Why don't they just play online game? Why do they stay in the stadium and to be physically there and looking like they're playing face to face, but actually they play in the virtual world? But we do see the value. I think from last week, the whole like League of Legends domestic event had to postpone for 1 hour because the whole pace has been accelerated because there are no game player interview, there are no audience like interaction during the event, but people just basically look into the game itself. But we do see the value if you don't have the live event for esports. People don't think it's a real event or real professional sports event. So I think that's some takeaway from what we learned from China. And I think that will happen for the more events in the future that people emphasize that we must host offline events as well. That's the improvement of how esports will evolve in the next step.
Thank you. So one thing that's been fascinating to me here over the last few weeks is this convergence that we're suddenly seeing of traditional sports and esports. And convergence is probably too grand of a word, but of course the eNASCAR event where we have real NASCAR drivers competing in an esports sort of context, although all they're doing is driving the simulators, which I guess which is what they do, I guess, as part of their training. But now having those simulator experiences broadcast on traditional TV and attracting record audiences, or at least audiences on TV that are comparable to what the actual live races would get. And similarly, but different, in the case of NBA 2K, where we have real NBA players who are sitting in their houses, which actually is half of what's interesting to me is just looking around their shoulders and see what their places look like, and kind of trash talking each other and playing a video game. Which obviously has nothing whatsoever to do with their actual sport. So those are kind of two different models of how esports and traditional sports could synergize and possibly converge. Karim, do you think that this actually could be the beginning of some kind of new relationship between traditional sports and esports, or is this just kind of something that's filling the gap until the stadiums are full of real people again?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that so the idea of having an NBA player play Dragon Ball is not new. I mean, we've been creating shoulder content with the NBA in conjunction with the NBA for a number of years now, and they're always at our booth at E3 and so forth. I think what's happening here is as we move to a bigger online community, right? I think the necessity to create additional shoulder content to entertain people becomes greater and greater. So I think here what you're seeing is basically an acceleration of this type of content, right? Just like we would want to create new shoulder content. The NBA players are not doing anything; they're not playing currently. They are training, obviously. I hope they are, but they are playing video games, and each player has their favorite video game, and that's great shoulder content that we have the ability to broadcast, because ultimately we still have to provide that entertainment online. And if we don't have a necessarily a live event, then we have to create the additional content. So that's how I see that part of the business going.
Great. Jacob, any thoughts on that?
I think that it actually highlights some of the problems with esports today, which is to say, one of the reasons that NASCAR on television works is that it's a sport built for viewership. People understand it looks like the sport, and therefore you can watch it like the sport. You can broadcast league on television, but most people will not have any idea what it is that they're seeing if they're not a player. And so what it highlights to me is the fact that most of the products that people consider to be esports today are built for players of the game, that they haven't been built for people who are non-players, because I'm not a professional driver, but I understand cars turn left, right? And who's ahead of who. And so that there are a lot of challenges toward creating product that is interesting for mainstream audiences to watch from the perspective of cameras, storytelling, etc. But it's really up to the publishers, and we've got two of them here on the call, to decide whether that is actually a market they're interested in. Because for the most part today, and this is the case for whether it's Bandai's content or Tencent's content, you're marketing to your players, you're increasing your player base. Your product is there to help generate more sales of your game. And I'm not sure that non-gamers are ever the intended audience, at least with the content that exists today, that perhaps something like Valorant could be the opening salvo for it.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, Neo, so Karim, of course, mentioned the shoulder content. Are you seeing an increase in the shoulder content production in China, and possibly any relation between traditional sports and esports developing?
Yeah, that's also happening. What we used to some, for example, last year we worked with NBA player. NBA player played our PUBG Mobile and to join our events, online, offline events. So this is more like what Jacob said. It's more like a marketing tool to attract users' eyeball. But we do see a lot of organic content generated by these players, pro players. We all know like Ben Simmons is a big fan of our PUBG Mobile, and last year, early this year, I think it's Giannis on Twitter invited Stephen Curry, said, "Hey, why don't you join me for the PUBG squad?" So that's a very interesting topic that increase our community and engagement for our event, and potentially to help the game itself and help the esports. I don't deny that can potentially increase our sales, the user base, but I think most importantly for the esports industry, it's became more people should be able to join, should be able to understand what's going on with that, and be more attractive to the mass media, not just some like a core gamer. That's what I see the change happening right now.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Well, let's jump to maybe what is the biggest question on many people's minds who understand this space and who are considering what the future might be for esports. And we'll start with Jacob because he has some strong opinions on this issue. Do you think there's opportunities for sustainable, independent businesses in esports? Which is to say, is esports really a new industry, as a lot of people say, or is it really just a new marketing channel for game publishers?
As it is today, it's a marketing channel for game publishers. And you can add value to marketing, as many agencies do. But it is hard to create businesses that generate enterprise value inside of this space. And I think that at the end of the day, there are only going to be two types. The first type is the type that provides technologies to game publishers. In other words, they're not trying to compete with the publishers for client value, right? They are making that publisher the source of value, and that is Unity as an example, Unreal Engine as an example, and other tools providers similar to the way the game industry ecosystem works together. There's plenty of middleware, there's plenty of platform providers, monetization providers. Twitch is included in here too. And the second one is the creation of content, which is to say you either build the game content or you build the shoulder content and monetize that from a lifestyle perspective, as 100 Thieves or other places do. But otherwise, it's hard to really build a business inside of that ecosystem where one party that controls the intellectual property can shut you down. It's not like the NBA, right? I can go play basketball tomorrow. I don't need permission from the NBA to do so. But I can't do that with League. I can't do that when the property is owned by the publisher. And so any business that tries to generate enterprise value inside of the ecosystem that is not providing value to the creator of that IP or is not the IP owner itself is going to have problems.
Yeah, thank you. So we have just a minute or two for responses and closing thoughts from our other panelists here before we go to Q&A. But Karim, what are your thoughts in response to Jacob there? And maybe you could let us know what you see as Bandai Namco's outlook for esports for the next few years.
Yeah, no, I think Jacob's phones are very good. I mean, I think that there's definitely going to be some value in companies that are setting up new technologies, and we're certainly looking at a lot of them today that complement basically the ecosystem or create a solution for a problem that we may have. We as a publisher certainly have been using esports as a platform to market our titles, to increase the community of our players, and so forth. So, I mean, we definitely look at esports as one of the areas that we're able to build larger communities around our game, which obviously creates more sustainable types of IPs. I think Tekken is now, as a premium console game, in excess of 5 million units. We're on our 4th season, season pass. So obviously we've been able to really have a long life for this IP, and some great things are coming for the IP in general. Now, when it comes to our outlook, we consider esports to be a business within a business as of today. That's how we approach it. Certainly, we work very closely with the game teams to be able to deliver the best entertainment value that we can. But holistically, when we look at the next 3 to 5 years, we have certain types of business in Japan and Asia that are more focused on live entertainment and creating some additional content that's outside of games, and we see esports really kind of merging together with that. So whether we start creating events in the future that are bringing other types of entertainment. If we use these in general, where we mix maybe some anime IPs together with what we can offer on the esports front, I mean, we're trying to see how we can deliver a bigger package to our users, and this is in conjunction with the fact that I think every publisher today, and some of the ones like Bandai Namco, like us, that have been more brick and mortar distribution in retail, are reinventing themselves as B2C companies, where we have a direct relationship with our customer. So in addition to that, we have commitments from our studios to deliver more competitive games for the future. Of course, that will include more fighting games, but also branching out in different areas as well, where we can complement our offering when it comes to competitive gaming.
Thank you, Karim. Neo, maybe you can close us out with an inspirational message, and maybe even share what you see as the what we in North America can take from China as this esports ecosystem develops.
Sure. I think I agree with Jacob that most of the current game are not real esports game. They basically using esports as their marketing tool. These days, across the world, there's only, I can say, less than 5 titles people can seriously think it's an esports tournament. Like in China, we have a survey, 93% of people think League of Legends is real esports or real professional sports event. But I can consider the rest of the other games, their esports events is hard. Maybe the mobile esports is only on PUBG Mobile in China, and we have King of Honor, the mobile game. It became more professional these days, but it's still evolving. I can foresee in the 3 or 5 years, it's still growing in the esports. Right now, as Karim said, it's still industry in the industry. But I can foresee that it can be more independent. As the big publisher like Tencent, we definitely know the value. Like we cannot monopoly everything. Right? We have to make this all the stakeholders have show their value and bring the value onto the table and to share the interest of this industry growth. I think especially when the industry insights can provide us some number, like in the next 5 years, there will be 800,000 jobs will be related to esports will happen in China. I can see this happening right now because what China came from the Western market is that the traditional sport is so super success in the Western market, and China is definitely looking to how that evolves with the time goes by, like how whole infrastructure can be built to make it a real sports event or real content industry. What I think that the Western market can look into the China is that how fast it can around, how fast they can iterate to make things, make the content better. And for example, the esports in China is not just only the top tier. Like we have a very good youth training system. Like you need to build the pyramid rather than just focus on the pinnacle. There's only the top players. If it's running like that, it's not sustainable. And also we emphasize like the psychological wellness of the player these days, because people don't usually think it's very important. But from the traditional sports, everyone knows the psychological wellness, your body wellness are very important to make sure you success in this event. So overall, I think there's a lot we can talk about this industry in the future, but I definitely have a very positive attitude to this. And I think Tencent overall will invest more and more into this industry.
Yeah. Great. Well, thanks very much. So I think now at this point, we're going to move to a Q&A, and we will open the floor for that. Thank you.